Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I'm still shaking as I write this. What happened a few days ago at the grocery store was the most terrifying experience of my life as a new mother. Some background about me. I became a mom 6 months ago to the most beautiful baby boy. Those first few months were brutal. My husband and I had no idea what we were doing, and honestly, there were days I wondered if we'd ever figure it out. Sleep deprivation, constant crying, trying to navigate breastfeeding issues. It felt like we were drowning. But slowly, things started clicking into place. We learned our baby's cues, established routines, and most importantly, we found our rhythm as parents. My mother-in-law was incredible during this time, practically moving in to help us those first few weeks. She taught me everything from proper swaddling techniques to reading hunger cues. Without her, I don't think we would have survived those early days. The other thing you need to know about me is that I've been practicing martial arts since I was 7 years old. I have a 6th degree black belt in Taekwondo. It's been my passion and discipline for most of my life, though I took a break during pregnancy and the early newborn days. I never imagined I'd need those skills as a mother protecting her child. So a few days ago, my husband and I decided to visit his parents. They live about 20 minutes away, and these visits have become our weekly tradition. His parents absolutely adore their grandson, and honestly, the support means everything to us. We spent the afternoon there, his mom cooing over the baby while his dad showed my husband something in the garage. It was one of those perfect family moments that make all the sleepless nights worth it. Around 7 p.m., we decided to head home. When we were loading the baby into his car seat, I suddenly remembered we were running low on diapers and formula. We also needed to grab some groceries for dinner the next few days. We drove to our local grocery store, the same one we've been shopping at for years without incident. My husband grabbed a shopping cart while I got the stroller out of the trunk. Our little guy was sleeping peacefully, completely oblivious to the world around him. I remember thinking how lucky we were to have such a good baby who could sleep through anything. We entered the store, me pushing the cart and making a mental list of everything we needed, while my husband pushed the stroller. I was focused on not forgetting anything important, something I'm notorious for doing during grocery runs. We'd only been shopping for about 10 minutes when I heard it. That dreaded "excuse me" from behind us. The tone immediately put me on edge. It wasn't the polite "excuse me" of someone trying to get past in an aisle. It was loaded with entitlement and barely contained aggression. I turned around to see a woman in her 40s approaching us. She was wearing so much makeup it looked like she'd applied it with a paint roller. Her eyes were fixed on our stroller with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I asked her what she wanted, feeling immediately uncomfortable with her presence. She told me she had been following us for the past 10 minutes since we entered the store because she was fascinated with our baby stroller. She claimed she wanted to know where we got it so she could buy one for herself. The math didn't add up. Following us for 10 minutes, that wasn't normal behavior for someone just curious about where to buy something. My maternal instincts were already firing warning signals, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and answer her question. I told her we bought it from the baby specialty store downtown. I explained that it was more expensive than some strollers but really comfortable, and thankfully we were able to afford it. She got excited and asked how much we paid for it. I looked at my husband, who was looking just as uncomfortable as I felt. Something about this woman's energy was completely off. I reluctantly told her it was around $2,000. Her jaw literally dropped. Then she started getting animated, her voice getting louder and drawing attention from other shoppers nearby. She kept going on about how that was so much money for a stroller and that we must be rich. She kept repeating that if we could buy something like that, we must have tons of money. The comment made both my husband and me uncomfortable. We've worked hard for everything we have, and it felt like she was dismissing all our struggles and sacrifices. We smiled awkwardly and nodded, then turned to continue our shopping, hoping she'd take the hint and leave us alone. That's when things took a turn into absolute insanity. She jumped directly in front of our stroller, blocking our path completely. Her entire demeanor shifted from fake friendliness to aggressive entitlement. She then made the most outrageous demand I've ever heard. She told us we should give her the stroller for her baby and just go buy ourselves a brand new one since we could easily afford it. She said it like it was the most reasonable request in the world. For a moment, we were too shocked to respond. Did this stranger just demand we give her our baby stroller? The audacity was breathtaking. I told her that we couldn't do that. I turned to my husband and said we needed to leave immediately. But when we tried to move around her, she stepped in front of us again. This time, she actually put her hand on our stroller, physically restraining us. She started yelling about why we couldn't just do one good thing in our lives and hand over the stroller. She screamed that it was nothing to people like us and that she and her baby deserved it more than we did. Then she demanded that we help out a single mother and give her the stroller right then and there. My husband's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He told her to get away from our family and warned her not to follow us or try to stop us again. He called her crazy, which was, honestly, putting it mildly. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life. Karen stepped directly in front of our stroller one more time, but now her face was twisted with rage. She looked completely unhinged. She screamed that if we were going to call her crazy, then she would show us crazy. She threatened to take our baby and not give him back until we handed over the stroller and walked away. The words that came out of her mouth were absolutely terrifying. And then she reached into our stroller, trying to grab our sleeping baby. I literally saw red. I've heard that expression my whole life but never understood it until that moment. Everything around me seemed to fade except for this woman's hands reaching toward my child. My husband immediately grabbed her wrists, trying to stop her from touching our baby. That's when she completely lost it and swung her purse at my husband's face, hitting him hard across the cheek. Everything after that happened in slow motion and lightning speed at the same time. Years of taekwondo training kicked in before my conscious mind could even process what was happening. I watched my left foot fly toward the side of her head with perfect form and devastating precision. The impact was immediate and decisive. She crumpled to the floor completely unconscious. My husband quickly gathered me and our baby, holding us both when other shoppers started gathering around the scene. We tried to leave, but two security guards and the store manager intercepted us at the entrance. My husband told them not to lay a finger on any of us. The manager asked us to please calm down and explained that he had already called the police. He said someone was unconscious on their floor and he couldn't let anyone leave until the officers sorted everything out. We waited, my husband holding our still sleeping baby while I tried to stop shaking. The woman started coming to when the paramedics arrived, and the sounds she made were absolutely horrifying. She was wailing and shrieking like a wounded animal. When the police arrived, two officers came to speak with us, while the other two went with the manager to review the security footage. The officers were professional and understanding, especially when they saw how shaken I was. The security footage told the whole story. Multiple customers who witnessed the incident backed up our account. The woman, who we learned had a history of similar incidents, was handcuffed while still screaming threats at everyone around her. She even tried to attack the paramedics, but was too disoriented to stand properly. We're pressing full charges, of course. Attempted kidnapping, assault, harassment, whatever the prosecutor thinks will stick. We're also pursuing a civil case for emotional distress and trauma. This woman threatened to steal our child over a stroller. I can't imagine what she might have done if she'd actually gotten her hands on him. 3 years ago, I made a decision that changed my life completely. I packed up everything I owned and moved to North Dakota. My family back home had become toxic, and I needed distance to build a life I wanted with my wife and girlfriend. Yeah, I know that sounds complicated, but we're all adults and it works for us. The move wasn't easy. Starting over in a new state with harsh winters and limited job opportunities meant we had to be smart with our money. After 2 years of renting and saving every penny, we finally bought our first house. It was a modest place, but it had enough room for us, and even an extra bedroom. Around that time, my friend from back home reached out to me. He was struggling in Mexico, dealing with family issues and having trouble finding stable work. He's autistic and has always been sheltered by his family, so navigating life on his own was particularly challenging for him. When he asked if he could come stay with us to get a fresh start, I talked it over with my wife and girlfriend. My roommate told me he didn't know what to do anymore. His family situation was getting worse and he couldn't find decent work where he was. I suggested he could come out to North Dakota since we had just bought a house with an extra room. He seemed surprised that I would let him stay with us. I explained that it wouldn't be easy and he'd need to find a job fast and work hard, but I could help him get started. After several conversations, we agreed he could move in. I was upfront about expectations from day one. This wasn't going to be a free ride and he needed to understand that adult life requires responsibility. When he arrived 6 months ago, I gave him two room options: a smaller bedroom on the main floor or a larger one in the basement next to a bathroom we barely used except for our weekly tabletop gaming sessions. He chose the basement room. My wife actually helped him get a job at the Walmart where she worked so they could carpool together. The job paid $18 an hour for full-time work, which is decent money around here. I told him he didn't need to pay rent for the first few weeks until he got his first full paycheck. Once he started earning regularly, I set his rent at $800 a month. That covered his fully furnished room, all utilities, high-speed internet, and we even lent him a gaming laptop. We provided free meals whenever we cooked, gave him rides to and from work, even on my wife's days off, and would pick him up for lunch during his hour-long breaks. The commute was only 15 minutes each way, but we did it without complaint. The only chores I asked him to do were keeping his room clean and loading the dishwasher. I have a torn disc in my back, so bending down to handle the dishwasher causes me significant pain. Those were literally the only two things I asked of him. We tried to include him in everything. We set up a table in our computer gaming room specifically so he could hang out with us. We invited him to meals and social activities, but he mostly stayed hidden in his room, only coming out when necessary. His eating habits were extremely restrictive. He wouldn't eat anything with seasoning, butter, cheese, vegetables, or sauces. We accommodated this by preparing separate portions of our meals without those ingredients. Often I'd have to take a bowl of food down to his room because he'd be too absorbed in online gaming to come upstairs. The only thing he seemed to genuinely enjoy was pepperoni pizza, which he requested constantly. Cooking two separate meals every night obviously created more dishes, which meant the dishwasher needed to be run daily. But my roommate found this task too burdensome after working his shifts at Walmart. He complained about not being able to do dishes on weekends because he was tired. He told me he shouldn't have to do dishes every day because it was too much after work. I reminded him that it was literally just loading the dishwasher and we were cooking separate meals for him and providing rides everywhere. He insisted that he was tired on weekends too. Instead of doing this simple chore, he decided to order food delivery for all his meals. When he ran out of money from spending it on takeout, he'd cook rice and fried spam using our stove and our pans. Then he'd use the excuse that he wasn't eating our provided food as justification for not doing the dishes. I repeatedly offered to help him get his driving permit and teach him to drive, but he always had excuses. He was too busy, too tired, or would just change the subject entirely. Then he got a boyfriend and started spending entire weekends at his place, making driving lessons even more impossible to schedule. The pizza situation became ridiculous. When my wife, girlfriend, and I would order pizza on lazy nights, he'd get upset because we wouldn't order pepperoni. He refused to eat plain cheese pizza and wouldn't pick pepperoni off other pizzas. Local pizzas cost $19 each, and he never offered to contribute money for his preferred topping. When we'd offered to take him to a drive-thru or Little Caesars instead, he'd decline but still complain. He would ask why we couldn't just order pepperoni pizza. I would explain that we don't like pepperoni and he was welcome to chip in for his own pizza. He would argue that he shouldn't have to pay extra just to eat. I would point out that he didn't have to eat pizza at all and we had offered to take him somewhere else. Over time, he started complaining that his rent was too high and that I was pressuring him too much about getting his driver's license. It became obvious he was planning to move in with his boyfriend. I advised him to at least get a car and license before making such a major decision, but instead of using his tax return for practical purposes, he bought an Xbox Series X and a $300 gaming monitor. This was frustrating because I'd already set up his existing Xbox on our 75-inch TV with surround sound in the basement gaming room. We only used that room on Sundays for our tabletop sessions while he was at work, so he had access to this premium setup whenever he wanted. His rent arrangement was to pay half every paycheck, which worked out to twice a month. On the 10th of the month, he told me he'd only pay for half the month and was moving to his boyfriend's apartment. Even after deciding to leave, he still expected my wife to drive him to his boyfriend's place, which was a 10-minute detour from our house. I told him that if he paid for the half month, we'd still help with rides, and I'd help him move his stuff on my next free weekend. He agreed but said he shouldn't have to pay the full amount if he was only staying half the month. I reminded him that was exactly what I had just agreed to. Friday the 13th arrived, and when I asked for the rent payment, he exploded. What followed was a 3-hour texting marathon where he sent me multiple lengthy messages detailing every grievance he'd apparently been harboring. He texted me saying that we were inconsiderate of his needs. He claimed we forced him to do dishes even though he didn't use them. He accused us of constantly pressuring him about driving and said we were always loud and overcharged him for rent. I responded that we had bent over backwards to accommodate him and the rent covered everything, including meals we prepared separately for his dietary restrictions. He argued that he never asked us to cook for him separately. I pointed out that he literally complained every time we made food he couldn't eat. He insisted that wasn't the same thing. The texts went on and on, each one more entitled than the last. He accused us of being terrible roommates while completely ignoring everything we'd done to help him. According to him, providing transportation, meals, utilities, internet, and a furnished room for $800 in today's market was somehow exploitation. Despite his attitude, I still helped him move all his belongings to his new place. I spent my entire weekend loading and unloading his stuff without complaint. After the move was complete, I had to contact his mother to get the $400 he still owed for his final half month of rent. Once his mother sent the money, my roommate proceeded to block me on every form of communication we'd used. He told mutual friends that I was a terrible person who had taken advantage of him. This reaction came after I'd changed the name of his old room to my needs on our Google Home system, which was an inside joke between my wife, girlfriend, and me about his constant complaints. The ridiculous part of this entire situation is that my roommate is 30 years old. This wasn't some young person making mistakes while learning to be an adult. This was a grown man who expected to be catered to while contributing the absolute minimum to the household. I work for a small consulting firm, and my boss is one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. He's this 40-year-old bachelor who lives alone and has zero organizational skills when it comes to his personal life. His apartment looks like a tornado hit it most days, but when he walks into a boardroom, he transforms into this polished professional who could convince anyone of anything. I've watched him close deals that seemed impossible just by talking. Last month, he had to fly out to Toronto for a big client meeting. It was one of those last-minute trips where everything had to be arranged quickly. The client was potentially worth 6 figures to our company, so the pressure was on. My boss had been working 16-hour days preparing his presentation and getting all the documents ready. The morning he was supposed to leave, he called me in a panic from the airport. He told me he was a complete idiot and had made a terrible mistake. When I asked what happened and whether he'd forgotten his presentation files, he said it was worse than that. He explained that he'd forgotten to pack enough clothes and had just grabbed whatever was in his dresser without thinking. He only had one clean dress shirt for a 3-day trip and apparently hadn't done laundry in weeks because he had exactly 0 clean underwear. He said he was being completely serious and would have to find a store when he landed. I could hear the boarding announcement in the background, so he had to run. But he called me again that evening, and I could tell from his voice that he was practically dying of laughter. He said I wasn't going to believe what had just happened to him. He explained that he'd found this upscale men's store downtown, It was a really fancy place with those intimidating salespeople who make you feel like you don't belong there. He was browsing through the dress shirts, trying to find something that didn't cost more than his car payment when this older guy approached him. The way my boss described him, this guy was probably in his 60s, well dressed but clearly not used to shopping in high-end stores. He kept looking around nervously like he was afraid someone would kick him out. My boss said this guy walked up to him and pointed to these hats on the wall display behind him. The customer asked if he knew anything about those hats up there. My boss said his first instinct was just to be helpful. He's always been like that, even with strangers. He suggested they take a look at what the store had available. They walked over to the hat display together. My boss said there were maybe 20 different styles, all looking pretty expensive. The older guy was clearly overwhelmed by the choices. The customer explained that he needed something for special occasions. His daughter was getting married next month, and his wife said he needed to look more distinguished. My boss asked what kind of occasions they were talking about besides the wedding. The customer mentioned church on Sundays and maybe some dinner parties, since his wife was always dragging him to social events. My boss started examining the hats more closely. He said he could see the price tags, and these things were going for $200 to $300 each. Ridiculous money for a hat, but clearly this guy was willing to spend it for his daughter's wedding. My boss pointed out one hat that would be perfect for formal daytime events like the wedding. He called it a classic style with a versatile color. The customer tried it on and seemed to like it, but then he started second-guessing himself about the size. He asked if my boss thought it fit right, because it felt a little loose. My boss suggested they check the size marking inside. He flipped the hat over and checked the tag. It was the right size, but when he was examining it, something clicked in his brain. He got that look he gets when he's about to close a big deal. My boss told the customer that the hat was perfect for the wedding and church, but he should really consider getting a second one. The customer seemed surprised and said that 2 hats seemed like a lot. My boss explained his reasoning. He said the customer should think about it differently. The brown hat was ideal for daytime formal events like the wedding ceremony, but for evening events, dinner parties, and more casual social gatherings, he'd want something in a different color, maybe a charcoal gray one. He handed the guy the second hat, and I could picture exactly how he was doing it. My boss has this way of making suggestions that don't feel pushy but somehow make complete sense in the moment. My boss continued his pitch, explaining that the brown hat said respectful wedding guest and Sunday church, while the gray one said sophisticated dinner party and confident social gathering. He told the customer he'd have all his bases covered. The customer admitted he hadn't thought about it that way. My boss pressed on, saying that buying both together meant he was basically getting a complete hat wardrobe. He called it an investment and always looking appropriate for any occasion. The customer was nodding along, getting more convinced by the minute. He mentioned that his wife was always saying he needed to put more thought into what he wore. My boss agreed, saying she'd be impressed that he thought ahead about different social situations. He told the customer it showed real consideration. The customer finally agreed, saying my boss had convinced him and he'd take both hats. My boss said he spent another 10 minutes helping the guy decide between slightly different shades and styles, really making sure he felt confident about the purchase. By the end, the customer was thanking him for the help. After the guy headed to the checkout counter with his 2 expensive hats, my boss continued shopping for his own stuff. He found a few dress shirts and some basic underwear, nothing too fancy since he was already spending more than he'd planned. When he got to the checkout line, he ended up right behind the same customer he'd just helped. They stood there for a few minutes, and my boss could see the guy's receipt when he paid. Both hats plus tax came to over $500. The customer turned around while waiting for his bag and really looked at my boss for the first time since they'd finished hat shopping. He asked if my boss actually worked at the store. My boss just smiled that charming smile of his and said he didn't work there, that he was just doing some shopping himself. The guy's face went completely red, like fire engine red. He grabbed his expensive bag of hats and practically ran out of the store without saying another word. The manager who was working the register started laughing when the customer left. He told my boss that in 15 years of working retail, he'd never seen anyone upsell better than their actual sales staff. He suggested my boss should consider a career change. My boss thanked him but said he'd stick to his day job. When the manager asked what he did for work, my boss simply said he was in sales. The manager laughed even harder at that response. My boss said he felt a little bad about it afterward, but honestly, the guy got exactly what he asked for. He wanted help picking out hats for special occasions, and my boss gave him genuinely good advice. The fact that it resulted in a bigger sale was just coincidence. When he told me the story, I started laughing. It was so typical of him to accidentally become the best salesperson in a store he didn't even work at. The customer got quality hats and expert advice. The store made a great sale, and my boss got a hilarious story out of his shopping trip. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.